Welcome to this confirmatory hearing. Just a bit of procedural matters before we commence the meeting. In a moment or two, we're going to stand and just give 1 minute's silence. This is something that is taking place throughout the country today for any formal meetings. And then once that's over, I'll just walk you through the process we're going to go through for this morning's session. So perhaps we could all stand for the minute's silence, please. Is that it? Thank you, everyone. So, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this confirmatory hearing. The process we're going to follow this morning is I'll first of all invite the Commissioner to give us a brief summary of the appointment, the process, and then I'm going to hand over and invite the independent external member of the panel to give us some thoughts from the process and her report. You may then leave. You don't need to stay for the rest of the meeting, but you're welcome to. So perhaps we can start the meeting. Apologies for absence, please.
Thank you. We've received an apology from Mayor Abrahams from Mansfield District Council, and he sent Councillor Stuart Richardson as substitute this morning. We've also had an apology from Councillor Woodings from Nottingham City Council, and we're expecting Toby Neal in her stead.
Thank you. Well, can we welcome our visitors this morning? Can I first of all welcome Professor Dame Elizabeth Fradd, who was the independent member of the panel for the appointment process, so welcome. I'd like to welcome also the candidate, Ms. Kate Maynell. I don't know, but I'm sure you probably do know some of the people around the room, but everyone's got their names in front of them. And the rest you'll get to know as we go along. To see that the Chief Executive is here from the Police and Crime panel, so welcome. Commissioner's office, I should say. I nearly adopted you there. Declaration of interest by members and officers. Anything to declare in the room? If not, can I declare, please, that I am a social friend of Professor Dame Elizabeth Fradd, and I can assure members that I've had no contact and no discussion in the process that she undertook on behalf of the Commissioner. So perhaps we can move then to inviting the Commissioner to give us a brief overview of what she wants us to hear about this process. Commissioner Henry, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you very much for all coming for another confirmation hearing this year. We have had a few to practice with, haven't we? But this is they're all important, but having the right Chief Constable for Nottinghamshire is absolutely vital. And I'm really comfortable that we've done a really open, fair and transparent process, and that my recommendation is that Kay Maynell is confirmed by you today as my preferred candidate. So just I know there's a report on this which has been put together for you, but if I just give you some highlights. I've had an excellent relationship with our existing Chief Constable Craig Guilford, and he's done some amazing things for our police force. But he did share with me that he was ready for his next career move earlier on this year, and I knew he was going for the job at West Midlands, and I'm not surprised they've snapped him up to do that. He was interviewed in June. His confirmation hearing was in July, and he is keen to start on the 5th of December. So with that in mind, and we needed to look for our next Chief Constable for Nottinghamshire. Now, I don't know if you're aware, there's a real small pool of people who are eligible to be a Chief Constable. So we quickly, led by my Chief Executive Officer, Sharon Cadell, who I've had to lean on throughout this process, and I'm really lucky that Sharon's been involved with Chief Constable recruitments before. So quickly we convened a working group in the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner, just a small team. We reached out to the College of Policing. Now, you don't have to reach out to the College of Policing, but they actually are the experts in leadership training for the police. And why wouldn't you lean out to a free service to help you? And they offer lots of support, and particularly Helen Slimman, who's their head psychologist, and Chief Constable Andy Marsh, who is over the college. So we reached out to them. Also, I'd got a really good idea of what I thought we needed as our next Chief Constable in Nottinghamshire, but I wanted to sense check. So we did two things. We reached out internally. We had an internal survey, which almost 800 people signed, gave us their thoughts on actually of what they thought we needed for our next Chief Constable. And we also did an external survey with key stakeholders. And their answers actually really shaped what we would go looking for in our next Chief Constable. Via the college, we wrote out to all eligible members, eligible people who could be a Chief Constable. And also we advertised, and we put it on our social media channels, our website. It was a 3-week, it needs to be at least 3 weeks. So we did it for over 3 weeks. Also, we're really keen that we had an independent, we've got the amazing Professor Dame Elizabeth Fradd to watch this whole process as an independent member, just to check that we were doing a fair and open process. We had a list of people who were interested, but Dame Elizabeth was the best person to help us on this. So then it came to shortlisting. We put a panel together of people who were going to help us shortlist. And these were the great and the good of Nottinghamshire, really, in Nottingham City. We had some amazing, you got the lists in the report. So we had consistent people to help us shortlist and help us do the final interviews. Before the shortlisting exercise, we had a briefing from Helen Slimman, and she, we'd all recruited before, but this is such an important role that Helen just reminded us best recruitment techniques, best scoring techniques, where we're using the competency values framework, which we used throughout the whole process, and just to make sure we're being really fair for everybody. So we'd had 3 people apply, 3 strong candidates, and actually 2 of them were much stronger than the third. So we decided that 2 would go through to the final interview process. The final interview process was equally rigorous. They had psychometric testing. They had to face an internal panel of with a real grilling from internal panel from the police, and also, again, because it's really important to me, key partners, key stakeholders, another panel. Then the next day, they came back again for the formal interview. Dame Elizabeth Fradd observed all of this, and I'm sure she'll share more. But one of the things that I was looking for throughout the whole process, and I didn't share this until we had the shortlisting process, was what I call my 4 T's, which was team. So, sorry, the first one is trust, team, together, and tomorrow. And I'm absolutely convinced that Kate Maynell will be the best person to lead Nottinghamshire Police Force, because trust, as Kate will demonstrate when you give her some questions, absolutely. The whole of the police force will trust the ethical leadership of Kate, and it's really important that we build trust and confidence in the police. Secondly, team. I had to think about who would fit with the chief officer team that we have currently, and I'm convinced that Kate will come in and hit the ground running. Together, I need to think about somebody who could work with all our stakeholders, all our partners, and that we could work together well, and the chemistry has to be right. And finally, together, Kate has some really strong experience and looking for, going forward, what we need tomorrow, and to build on what the excellent work of our existing Chief Constable has done already, but to take us to the next stage so we can be that outstanding police force, which I know we all want for our community safety. So it's a bit quick summary of the report, but I'm really happy to answer any questions, and I think it would be excellent if, with your permission, Chair, if Dame Elizabeth could speak about the process.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. We will have some questions, but we thought it was probably better to save anything until after we'd heard the independent member's report.
Thank you.
So can I invite Professor Dame Elizabeth Fradd to present or talk to her report? It's page 143 in your bundle.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to both confirm and reassure you all that my report on the process is a true record of what I saw, what I heard, and what I learnt throughout the process. And I trust that the report speaks for itself. I wasn't intending to go through it page by page, but I hope that it speaks for itself. However, what I do want to do is to briefly take the opportunity to confirm 1 or 2 things. Firstly, that I am entirely satisfied that the recruitment process was fair, it was open, and it was certainly rigorous from start to finish. It was carried out according to the College of Policing guidance, which is fulsome in the extreme. The panel members were unanimous in their recommendation to the Police and Crime Commissioner regarding the preferred candidate, who met the very demanding criteria on merit. And whilst I hope you are assured that I fulfilled my role as an independent panel member, it is only right that I also highlight to you all those that were involved in the process who worked extremely well together, and therefore there was a notion of interdependence too. I have drawn your attention to this at the end of my report in order to record my thanks to the College of Policing, who were extremely helpful, the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office, and also all my panel colleagues who ensured that the process was efficiently and fairly managed. And finally, if I may, Chair, I would just like to say one other thing, which is not strictly speaking relevant to your discussions today, but I would also like to add that I and other panel members think the key elements of the recruitment process are ones that other public services should consider utilising because of the rigour that is involved. And I'm very happy, thank you, to take any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. It's, I think, given us great confidence in the process that was followed. We've got a wealth of documentation that you've kindly provided for us in advance. And I think it's interesting in your observations, Professor, that you think this system or process that you've experienced could be something that could be adopted by other areas. What specifically was it that I guess, enhanced your great knowledge of doing those sorts of appointments?
I have been on many recruitment panels at all sorts of different levels and across different organisations. And the thing that is so impressive is the coherence of the process that the College of Policing has set out, the very clear criteria that we were recruiting against, that linked to both the values that go throughout the police force and the behaviours, and that these were truly tested throughout the process and scored, and each of us independently did the scoring, and then there was a culmination of those put together. Now, I've been on panels in many organisations where elements of that have pertained, but the consistency across the entire police force, across the entire country, is what is so persuading in my view. And I'd love to see that in health in particular, social care, education, and many other organisations.
Thank you. I sense perhaps a research paper being formed in someone's mind here. Are there any questions? Thank you. Councillor Carlton.
Thank you, Chairman, and firstly, thank you to the Commissioner and Professor Dame Elizabeth Fradd for your opening remarks here to the panel this morning. Just a couple of questions, Chairman, to the Commissioner herself. And obviously, you alluded to the 4 T's within your opening remarks. I was just wondering if you could expand on that a little bit bigger and a little bit further as to why Ms Maynell really is the preferred candidate.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carlton. It was really interesting because people thought that Kate might have had knowledge of the 4 T's, and I can guarantee she didn't, because everything I wanted to hear was being said during the process, and also being fed back from the psychometric testing too. So the first one is trust. It's not just the trust we need internally with the police force, it's the trust with the partners. And you know, I've been talking a lot about trust and confidence with the public too. Kate had really researched what we need to do to increase trust and confidence, which is one of the main things I'm looking for in my tenure. The next one was team. We've had a period of stability with having the Chief Constable there for 5 years, and also Deputy for has moved on recently. So the boat could be a little bit rocky, but I genuinely think with Kate's fantastic interpersonal skills and how she empowers people and the well-being that's really important to her, she will absolutely come into that team and inspire and lead them. You know, she's got evidence of doing that wherever she's been, and I'm sure she'll give you some examples. The next one is together, and Kate really gets the partnership work. I think some of you may have worked with Kate before when she was previously in Nottinghamshire, and we cannot police in isolation. It is a whole system approach. Kate gets that, and she'll demonstrate that to you. And finally, tomorrow, Kate demonstrated an understanding that we need to move forward. You know, we've got a really strong base in Nottinghamshire. We've done some really good stuff, and thank you very much to the Chief Constable for where he's got us. But we need to build on that. You know, we need to be thinking about what we can do to be an outstanding force, where the gaps are, and Kate will demonstrate to you how she can do that. So I was absolutely confident those 4 T's were gold star every way.
Thank you. Did you want to come back, Councillor?
Thank you. I thank you, Commissioner, for your response to that. Obviously, given your role as Police and Crime Commissioner for Nottinghamshire, obviously you have the responsibility of holding the prospective Chief Constable to account. So I'd just like to be interested to see what are your priorities for the prospective Chief Constable for the next 6 to 12 months.
again, I think I've touched on it a little bit with what I've just said, in that I do want to make sure we've got a steady ship. We're doing some really good work already, but building trust and confidence is really important. We've got some areas for improvement which were identified in the peeling inspection. We're already working on those, but they are important, and they're going to be front and centre. If I go back to my main priorities of preventative work, we working with our partners, looking at the neighbourhood policing and the responding, and finally, one of my personal things is making sure VORG is really important, and making sure our victims get what they need, victims and survivors get what they need, and Kate's got a passion for that too.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other question to the Commissioner at this stage? Thank you. And can I thank Professor Dame Liz Fradd for attending this morning. You've given us a great deal of confidence in the process, which is very important as a starter for 10, as you might say. So please feel free to stay or leave as you so wish. And thank you very much for your contribution. That leaves us now to move forward to meet and greet and welcome the potential candidate in Ms Maynell. You've had a copy of all the questions. I think there's quite a lot of them, and we hope to get through most of them, so bear with us. Do you want a 2-minute break before we start, or are you content to move on? You want happy to go on? I'll get my list of questions. I'm going to kick off, if I may. Moving into a new Chief Constable role, what thoughts have you given to the challenge of managing your operational independence whilst developing your ongoing relationship with the Police and Crime Commissioner, the districts, the Police and Crime Panel? I could go on, but you get the drift.
Okay, morning everybody. So yes, operational independence is the cornerstone to my role, and it's important that I maintain that. But also I recognise the importance of the role of the Police and Crime Panel and also the PCC in the level of scrutiny that's offered to myself and also to the PCC in order to ensure that we deliver the best possible service we can for the communities of Nottinghamshire. And I think that's a really important fact, is to actually acknowledge and accept that scrutiny and know that it's part of the role. In terms of the policing protocol, I think that gives us a really good ground in understanding that relationship. But what's really important to me is that I spend time with the PCC in the first instance on making sure that we both have the same understanding around the protocol and what that means. And we regularly sense check that and meet regularly to look at that to ensure that we are both interpreting it in the same way. I also think it's important that we work closely together as two individuals, but also the two officers as well, so the police service as well as the office of the OPCC is really important, because it's those relationships that's going to help build us the plans for the future. It's my I'm determined to have a strong relationship and develop that relationship from the moment that hopefully things go well today, so we can actually have those difficult conversations now. We ensure that we have those conversations early and things don't progress too far. We have clear lines of accountability and responsibility, clear frameworks so that we understand the clear levels of governance. Because if we spend the time doing those things now, that will prevent the problems in the future. But also not fearful of those difficult conversations that we need to have. As I said, the reason we're all here is public service, and that's we need to remember that, and that's why you will do your role, the PCC her role, and myself my role. So I think for me, around the operational independence, that's really important, but I also feel that I have something to offer around operational context for both the PCC and the panel as well, and providing that context in terms of any responses that we give or any sort of updates that are provided. I'm able to do that. Having been in Nottinghamshire previously, I am aware of the positive relationship with the panel and how that's worked in the future, and that's something that I would be looking to maintain as we move forward. So I'm confident that if we spend the time around in the early days, but we continue to do that, around that understanding about what's, operationally is my responsibility and what's for the PCC around the scrutiny, I'm confident that we should be able to maintain that integrity as we move forward.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Can I invite Councillor Antrona, please?
Thank you. Good morning. Kate, is it okay if I call you Kate? All right, thank you. Welcome today. I just want to say thank you for applying for the position, and if things go successfully today, I wish you every success, and anything we can do to help, we certainly will. I've got 2 questions, if that's all right, and there's a little supplementary to each, so I don't know how you want to play them. But first, I'd just like to ask, as Chief Constable, you have obviously the responsibility for operational policing, but how will you seek to work with those key partners in Nottinghamshire with regard to operational activity, which will include resource allocation, which you no doubt get some challenges around, and how do you intend to manage expectations and demands?
Okay, thank you. So, as has been spoken about a few times this morning, working with partners is critical. Policing isn't going to solve problems itself anymore. We can't just arrest a way out of issues. I have a strong track record of working in partnership. Previously, in my role as ACC in Nottinghamshire, worked with the COVID response and chaired the SCG around that. And likewise, when I moved across to Derbyshire, I use that as an example. Whilst it was a very, very unusual set of circumstances, it was an extremely demanding set of circumstances. And for me, the principle that I always work upon really around partners is trying to find that mutual ground, that mutual understanding. As I've spoken already this morning about, the reason we're here is for the service for the public. So for me, around partnership working, it's about understanding, what the demands are on one another. I think within Nottinghamshire, there's already some really good, strong relationships. I think I have some from when I was here previously, but I'm not going to rest on my laurels around those partnership and those sort of mutual respect is reliant on continued work to make sure that develops. But there's in terms of the Chief Executives Forum and the LRF, there's some really good partnerships that already work. So I intend to build upon those. There's also a lot of statutory partnerships, which I think work really well, but I would like to take the opportunity just to reassure myself with some of the statutory partners that they are working as we feel is appropriate and that things are still in the positions they should have been. The other thing really then around partnership is that it will be very much centre about the work I do. So when I talk about if successful around the vision, how I'm going to deliver things, partnership will be very much part of that. And I think as a leader, it's really important that you talk and you role model your expectations, because partnerships, probably at the strategic level, there are those systems in place, but it's really relying on at the tactical and the local level that those partnerships are working. And I need to make sure that my officers and staff understand the importance of partnerships, and they are replicating my desire to work in partnership at that local level as well. So again, for me, it's around that expectation, around our values, and around our priorities within the organisation will be based very much around partnership working and the importance of that. And that will be very much part of our approach to policing as we move forward.
Okay, thank you. Just as a sub-question to that, if we were to look at last year's appointment of the Chief Constable for Greater Manchester Police, many would suggest there's been quite a paradigm shift in approach, and I just wondered if you'd got any observations or thoughts on that.
Sorry, I thought I was putting his hand up. In terms of Greater Manchester Police, it's very difficult for me to comment because it was in a very, the force found itself in a very difficult position, I think. And probably needed some wholesale changes. From the outside looking, I don't have any inside sort of knowledge of that. I think in respect for Nottinghamshire, I think we're in a very different position. And for me, and I know the PCC's used the phrase a number of times this morning, but it's important that we're talking about building, because there's some really good stuff that we need to build on. And partnership would be one of those. We need to build on it, but equally what we need to do now is develop and evolve and make sure that we're fit for the future. So I think in terms of this, I don't foresee any paradigm shift. I don't see any significant change in how we need to approach things, but it's more that evolution, that making ourselves fit for the future and also becoming a little bit more sophisticated in what we deliver, because we've got a lot of the basics right, and that's what we needed to get right first, and that's what the Chief Constable of Nottinghamshire certainly delivered in the past few years.
Okay, thanks for your honesty. Do
Did
you want me to ask
come
the
back?
second question
Yes.
later or now,
Uh,
please?
You have the floor.
Okay, thank you. So you clearly must be cognizant of where Nottinghamshire is, and I don't mean obviously geographically, but what do you see as your main priorities for your first 180 days or 6 months in post?
As you would expect, I would have, I will hope to have a plan. So I'll be looking at a 100-day plan. And what I do want to do before sharing that is have some conversations with chief officers, senior leaders within the organisation, but also going back to Nottinghamshire. I've been left for about 2 years just to make sure that my sense of where the force is at is accurate, because obviously you would expect I've done some research prior to joining the role and I've also seen from afar, but I want to be really clear what that is. So I don't think at the minute I'm in a position to provide detail around that. However, what I do think is really important, so there's three things for me, is around making sure the communities feel safe and listened to. That will be very much key to what I want to deliver. Making sure that we have a service that's fit for the future, where we use data effectively and we are evidence-led in the way we do our work, but also then that we have a workforce that's engaged and empowered, because it's the workforce that's going to deliver what the vision is. It's these people that I'm going to rely on, and I need them to be a high-performing team. Very much believe in a team, so it's not about me. I will set the vision. I will set the role model, the standards, but I need my team to work really effectively. And for me, team is really important. It's something that really drives me. Also, in terms of that 100-day plan, I would also be wanting to look at what we, in terms of an internal and external communication plan. So I want to be really clear from day one, internally and externally, what I stand for. And that, I've already started to give that some thought without being presumptuous. But also I would be seeking some reassurance around what we're doing around some key pieces of work. So around the VORG national strategy and around the race action plan, just to understand actually how Nottinghamshire is delivering that, and whether that's been done in the way that I would like it to be done, whether there's the scrutiny and the accountability in relation to that. The other thing I would also want to be doing is around some of the areas for improvement that have been identified by HMIC. I want to make sure that we are actually already in progress about addressing those, that we're able to learn from those AFIs and make sure that not only do we just address the immediate AFI, but we develop and learn and move forward. Talked about team very briefly. I want us to be an organisation that learns from experience as well, and I need to create that sense of trust where people can be honest when things have gone wrong, so we can try and improve. And finally, for me, really, I think one of the most important things about being a senior leader is around my standards and values and what I expect, and being very clear about what those are. Because for me, it's really important that we have an inclusive workforce where people feel that they can be their true, authentic selves within the organisation. That enables them to be their best self. It enables them to work and respect one another, which in turn, I believe, means they're more likely to be respectful and work well with the communities. I think the values that Nottinghamshire Police have got already are still valid. However, what I'd like to do is to do some work around actually bringing them to life and explaining to people, to the front line and to members across the organisation, what actually does that mean every day in practice, and what's the expectation about how you will behave.
Thank you very much. Do you want to come?
If we were just to extend that timescale to a year, and I'll come back to my one of my favourite topics at the moment, which is Greater Manchester. I've got some close family there and a lot of friends, and certainly in the last year they felt that there's an improvement, particularly around things like antisocial behaviour, which is a topic certainly in the rural parts of the county which seems to be an increasing concern. I do appreciate your comments that you can't just necessarily arrest your way out of problems, but one of the key elements of the first year report for Greater Manchester Police was an increase in their arrests of 61%. Now, I'm not saying that's what we need, but what I would like to just ask you is that after a year, what would be the one key metric you'd like to see associated with your tenure in the role?
So just for clarity around, not arresting the way out of problems, I think to be really clear, I do recognise that the police have a role to play. Most definitely we do, and that's, some of that is around enforcement, some of that's around visibility and reassurance. So I don't want that to be misinterpreted. I think for me, the key metric I would be looking for is around public confidence. I think it's really important if we are going to be successful as an organisation that the public have that trust and confidence in us, and that we are seen as legitimate. Nationally, public confidence is an issue, and that is likewise within Nottinghamshire. So that would be the one area I would look at. I don't think it's a particularly easy area, but it's not one that I would shy away from, and it's something that is really important to me and links directly back to the aim I spoke about communities feeling safe and listened to. I think that's very much linked in with that.
Yeah.
Lee,
Can I just say thank you for that, given the hearing and the circumstances, quite a candid response, and I appreciate that.
Councillor Lee, you put your hand up halfway through, so I'm sure you've got something that was already touched on.
I did. Manchester is a big one for me. My family have policed in Manchester. I'm from Greater Manchester. I've still got family that work for the Chief Constable in Manchester. What we saw there was great. We saw somebody come in, make wholesale changes. And I know you've said you won't look at wholesale changes in Nottingham. I would ask you to reconsider that. I would say some communities have majorly felt left behind. My community of Newark and Sherwood feel in some cases we've been left behind. We've got a major antisocial behaviour issue. And I would say, how are you going to bring along the communities that have felt that they've been left behind? And how are you going to make sure you take everybody with you? Okay,
so in terms of making the communities come with me, that obviously again links in with the listening to communities. I think historically the police have been very much of the approach that we've told people this is what you want, these are your priorities, this is what's important. So it's important we listen to communities and then we act upon that. For me, around listening to communities, very much is integral to that is the neighbourhood policing model. So I think within Nottinghamshire, as at the moment, there is a really good offer around Operation Reacher, which is probably more of your traditional policing, the enforcement element. I think now, for me, one of the bits I'd like to look at is around this sort of prevention and the partnership at work, part of the neighbourhood policing offer. And for me, that's very much around engaging with the communities and working with the communities about what does that look like for them, and then being part of that. I think as well with communities, it's about looking at what ways we communicate with them and how we have that two-way communication process. And I know there's some examples nationally of good practice around that we're looking to explore, because we need to understand what the frustrations are. I think for me as well, what's also really key is around communication. And that's sometimes communication in saying why we're not doing things as well as why we are doing things, and explaining the reasons why. And that would be very important. Also around communities being involved, for me it's around the use of volunteers, both within sort of the policing organisation, but also around things like Neighbourhood Watch and other areas that they can become involved in. And as well as the IAG, so looking at how that works, but also linking again to one of the recommendations through the HMIC around our external scrutiny as well of some of the things that we do. I've just spoken about public confidence. Key to that is how we use our coercive powers and how we manage those. I really want to look at how we can expand how we seek community feedback around the use of those powers. So stop and search, use of force. Internally, we'll understand our data and what the issues are, but we need that feedback externally as well. So for me, it's around again how my approach to it, but also to my staff teams and staff and neighbourhood policing teams, trying to make them as stable as we possibly can. I think there's been a bit of churn. That's probably around some reasons because of uplift and the fact that a lot of PCSOs have joined the regulars. But if I can try and get those teams as stable as possible and get some continuity within the communities and to help improve that confidence, which will then help improve the communication and the fact that the communities feel that they're involved. But I think, Councillor, that the main bit around it for me is the communication really, and that sort of clear communication and sometimes as well the transparency about if things aren't quite right. you know, being open about that and looking to communities for their assistance with that as well.
Really pleased with that answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll go back to our order of service, as it were. Can I ask Councillor Helen Smith, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. That actually feeds in really well into my question. Anyone that knows me knows that I've talked a lot about the rebuilding the levels of trust and confidence, especially with national events over the last couple of years. What would be, in your view, the best way of rebuilding that trust and confidence? And I know you've touched on it a little bit, and I know we've got some particular projects like the Vogue project, which has been discussed around, that we've done a lot of work in my area on. But is there any particular way that you personally would like to see us working on those relationships, especially in communities that aren't as the more deprived communities, where they, as Councillor Lee said, they do feel like they've been left behind? I mean, one of the big things, I've got a big problem at the minute, I know it's a slight aside with distraction burglaries, but they're saying there's no point reporting it because we don't hear anything back. So, but that's a big issue, and we've been doing some work on that anyway. That's a separate thing. But how can we work with you as well as the district councils, the independent members, to improve that confidence, but particularly with your officers working with us in that regard as well?
Thank you. So as just hesitating slightly because I don't want to repeat myself too many times, albeit when we talk about public confidence, I think there's not one solution. I think if there was, we'd have all sort of done it, and it would be the panacea for everything. And I also think it takes time. But what it does take is commitment, and from my commitment to yourselves today is that public confidence is at the heart of what I want to achieve, and that won't change. I think sometimes there's a perception that new leadership, new thing, people move on. So public confidence is really important. I think the neighbourhood policing model is really critical to delivering that. I think, it's easy once you get a team that's established, that's known within the community, that people, trust does take time to build. And I think that, familiarity helps with that. So I think there's this part of that. I think there's being able to evidence that we do listen. So, if there are particular issues within a community, we're able to respond to them where we can. We are able to identify areas where there are particular crime trends, so we can, higher visibility patrols in order to provide that reassurance. In areas where there's been particular incidents, where there's concern, we're able to sort of provide those higher visibility patrols around that. Another bit for me, really, and it's an internal issue for myself, but I think it has a massive issue around sort of public confidence, is around organisational justice. So I'm really determined to have an organisation that treats one another with fairness and respect. I want members of my organisation to be upstanders, that when they hear behaviours that aren't appropriate, they stand up to it. They're the guardian of my values. I can't be everywhere listening to things. They do that. I say that because if I can get that right internally, I have more confidence that when they're out and about, they treat with people with that respect they deserve. I speak often to frontline officers about the importance of, often it's the only time you will meet somebody in a community. It's the only time somebody will meet the police officer, and that meeting is so important about how you behave, and it will be then set the tone for how they view the whole of the organisation. So that's really key that we get that right. There's a bit around the coercive powers again, which I don't intend to repeat. But for me, again, I think it's around that transparency as well. What our performance is like, where things aren't going as well as they should be doing, but what we're trying to do about that. But also, what I'd really like to do is get to the point where the communities are starting to help with some of the issues. So if we take the example around the distraction burglaries, people feel confident if they report them that we will respond properly, we will get the basics right, we will do what is expected, and we will do our part. But then also that communities can start to give us some information and start to be the eyes and ears, start to provide that intelligence that we need, because that then, it demonstrates that confidence. So something that I'm totally committed to, albeit I recognise it's going to take some time. But I think as well, as the senior leader within the organisation, the fact that it's a consistent thing that I'm talking about is what I would expect my leaders, and it'll be part of the, the expectation around leaders within Nottinghamshire Police. Then hopefully those behaviours will then cascade down through the organisation to those, sort of contact points within communities where it's so critical, and where something can go a little bit wrong and then have particular ramifications.
Thank you. Did you want to come back, Councillor?
Just really quick, thank you, Chair. Thank you for that, Kay. I appreciate it. And like I say, we know it's not going to fix overnight, and we know it's something that it's not just the police. Everyone's got to work together to fix the problem. But the other thing that I just wanted to quickly, very briefly touch on, if everything goes well and you are appointed in this role, as part of that ongoing engagement and confidence building, would you be willing to come to the meet with the leaders and deputy leaders of the districts and maybe do a bit of a tour around the districts with some of the elected members to see what the trouble hotspots are in the individual areas? Is that something you'd be willing to do?
Most definitely, and I think, when I talk about that information gathering that I need to do around understanding where the organisation is, I would see that as part of that. So yes.
Thank you. If we could move on then, please, to Mr. Bopper Newton. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned briefly earlier on your relationship with the Police and Crime Panel. We've been very lucky with previous Chief Constables. They've taken us quite seriously, and they've come along and they've been very candid, very open when they were able to. So based on your previous experiences, what sort of involvement would you expect to have with us?
Thank you. So for me, I think the starting point, as I said in answer to a previous question, is recognising the role that you have in holding the PCC to account. I very much see my role as providing that operational context, i.e. either for the updates that the Police and Crime Commissioner will give yourselves, or also for some questions that you may ask. But again, for me, I recognise the strong relationship there's been in the past with previous chief officers, and it would be something that I would want to continue to do in order to provide that best possible service we can, and in order to put the public first and make sure that we can deliver the best policing we possibly can for the communities of Nottinghamshire.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Inglis, I know you put your hand. Is it related to this topic, or is it a new question? Can I just ask? New question. Do you want to go ahead and ask it?
Yeah, I can do. Yeah, okay. You speak about your 100-day plan, the year plan. I'm looking further ahead, because obviously there's a time when you're going to retire or move on. What would you like your legacy to be?
For me, in terms of a legacy, I'd want it to be that I would leave an organisation that was clear about putting the public first, that recognised the importance of public confidence, but also that worked as a team and with a real clear leadership standard, so that everybody was clear about what being a leader for Nottinghamshire Police was about, but that we worked as a team. I think it's really important that if we are going to be successful, we do that all together. So they would be the things for me. So team, public confidence, and public focused.
Thank you. Mrs. Harding, thank you.
Good morning. I'm here. My area of expertise is criminal justice, so my questions are going to be centred around those. What has been your experience of inputting into the criminal justice system? That's my first question. And then the second question is, what do you think you'll be able to help in influencing criminal justice improvements in Nottingham?
Thank you. So in terms of my experience inputting into the criminal justice system, my background is very much as an investigator, as a senior investigating officer. Investigated a number of homicides both across Nottinghamshire and across the region as well. And the reason I mention that is because that has given me real first-hand experience of seeing the impact that trials have on families, on victims, and on witnesses. The impact that has when it's stretched over such a long time, and when there's a number of different cancellations. So I've seen that firsthand, and it's that empathy towards that position that really grounds me in the work that I do. Also around the criminal justice system, I've worked as staff officer for the disclosure lead. So when we had a lot of scrutiny around disclosure, I was involved sort of the national mechanics and how that worked. I've been involved locally, both in Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire, around delivery against the criminal justice plans in terms of how we can improve the quality of our files, about the timeliness of our files, and some of the attrition rate at court. And I've also done some work around out-of-court disposal, and I think out-of-court disposals are probably quite key as we look forward around sort of the issues around criminal justice. So in terms of for this sort of second part of the question and about, you know, what can I do to influence that? I think the first thing is in order, first of all, is about, from a police perspective, about getting our bit right. So we have a real significant role to play in terms of the quality of the investigations we conduct, quality of the files we submit, but also the victim care that we provide, working obviously with the PCC and Services Commission. You know, there's a lot that we can do around that, and I'm really determined that we will do that and getting that right. But I also think there's something around our relationship with CPS and how we can work with them, and how we can make sure that our targets are mutually dependent rather than sort of working against each other at times. So, you know, that would be something that I would look to do as well around that. So that's how I sort of see the influence, but also being involved in those sort of conversations around criminal justice, because as we sort of sit here now, I'm all too aware of, because of post-COVID and probably before then as well, the delays and the impact that has on victims and witnesses, and how it makes sometimes bringing some people to justice really difficult just purely because of the length of time. So determined that from our perspective we'll get our bit right, but anything I can do externally with partners in order to progress that, determined to do that as well.
Thank you very much for your answer. I hope you will be successful, and if you are, I look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Richardson, thank you.
Thank you and welcome, Kate. You've come with a reputation of neighbourhood policing, and that's evident in some of your answers. So the question I got has somewhat been answered already. In Mansfield, we've got a particular problem, as has been highlighted in many other districts, with antisocial behaviour that seems to be on steroids since COVID. And I would like to know, working in partnership with Mansfield District Council, and I'm being quite selfish in naming Mansfield, how we get a free flow of information. It's not, in my experience, the information from the police being passed to our antisocial behaviour teams that would enable them to work in conjunction with one another has not been good enough, frankly. And I've had cases that have gone on for 2 years and information has not been forwarded to our antisocial behaviour teams, so they could have acted more expediently. So, as well as having an emphasis on antisocial behaviour, which, in my experience, from 2007, when Khan introduced neighbourhood policing model to Mansfield, it was a win-win situation for the police. It's a win because subsequently crime fell, and there was an uplift in the perception that the police were doing a good job. So basically, you've sort of answered the question, how would you guide the force in Nottinghamshire to get back to that gold standard?
Yeah, as I say, I think I've spoken quite a lot about that, and that sort of links in with the things I've said around neighbourhood policing, but also that communities feeling safe and listened to. I'm all too aware that antisocial behaviour, you know, affects quality of life of people, and it's important that we, when we look at antisocial behaviour, we do have that sort of two-flow of information, both with the communities but also with partners, that we identify which is the best agency to deal with things as well. So I think I probably have answered it, and you know, in terms of specifics, so obviously perhaps need to look at that outside the meeting, because it would appear to be counterintuitive if we're not doing that. But for me, antisocial behaviour, very much at the centre of neighbourhood policing model, and very much something that, you know, that I think we need to make sure that we are able to address it both alongside communities but also partners. If we're going to actually stop this behaviour, divert some of these individuals, we need to look at that holistic approach.
Can I just make a further comment? Chair. Yeah, we've got a new inspector, Kylie Davis, in Mansfield, and she has made an excellent start in that direction. I've had several conversations with Kylie, and I'm very pleased with the work that she's doing there, and hopefully you could sort of emphasise a focus on what everybody's, you know, the partnership working is crucial, but also the stability of having the people know the police in their area, in the neighbourhood. And it, you know, this comes back to me. At one time, you used to know the policeman. You know, I used to have Marcus Turney in my ward many years ago, and he was always there and about. And that's crucial for the people where I do my work, where my ward is. And so I absolutely look forward to that emphasis that you seem to say you're going to provide.
Thank you, Councillor Richardson. Can I bring in Councillor McRae, because I know he's very interested and wanted to ask questions around the community.
Good morning. How will you make local communities feel that they are involved in policing? And I think that should also say, how can we do that as well? Because we do need to work together, don't we?
We do, yeah, that's right. And I think I probably answered that question a little bit when I responded to Councillor Lee. So, you know, for me, it's around, you know, when I purposely say feel safe and listen to, you know, I make that differentiation. I think it's important. You know, sometimes, you know, we will talk about crime figures reducing, but actually it doesn't translate into people feeling safer. So for me, around communities, again, I don't want to repeat myself, but it's around that sort of around the community engagement, around that the local level, understanding what the issues are. Those neighbourhood policing teams, working around prevention as well. But again, you know, for me, it's all also around that the feedback as well, and you know, from yourselves understanding if things have gone wrong, we need to know about that. We need to and face up to those things. I'm a great believer in, you know, accepting when we have made mistakes, because if we don't accept when we've made them, we'll never learn from them. But, you know, that's when I talk about that sort of transparency as well. And if we do make mistakes, it's about, you know, putting those right as soon as we can, and they're learning. So if there's anything specific you want to ask me, I'd sort of just hesitate a little bit, because I think I've mentioned a lot of it, Councillor Murray, unless there's something particular. Sorry.
Right, you was kind of answering stuff as you was going along, but I was still going to ask it anyway. You know, I think we're very lucky in Broxtowe. We've got a cracking police team, and I can't speak for other areas because I'm sure they're good as well. I don't know them, but the ones in Broxtowe are really good, and you'll always hear me thanking them. And I think if you do get this today, as the councillor next to me has just said, it would be nice to invite you to places like Stapleford, Beeston, and particularly Eastwood at the moment. And I think it'd be nice to have a walk around them areas and see what we can all do, because like I said, we've got to work together, haven't we, to make this work.
Definitely, and I'd welcome coming back to Eastwood. I worked at Eastwood when I first started, so that'll be a trip down memory lane.
I think it's one of the advantages you'll have with an empty diary. You will know most of the areas of Nottinghamshire to visit in your first 2 weeks, I think. We've just got a couple of more questions to go. Can I invite Councillor Ellis, please?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for coming. And it's good to see somebody from Arnold getting on and coming back and making a difference. So I don't need to invite you to Gedling, because I know you know the area. The Commissioner mentioned the importance of teams, and there's been a rapid churn of leadership in them. We've lost a well-respected Deputy Chief Constable, and we're losing a well-respected Chief Constable, which of course provides an opportunity for other people. Just thought, what thoughts have you got about steadying the ship?
You're right, we have lost obviously the Deputy and the Chief Constable in relatively quick succession. And I think looking back, we can see the benefit of having that stable team for such a long time. And, you know, I've spoke a few times today about building on the good that's happened, and I think that part is down to the stability that was in the team. I don't feel like, and I feel like I'm coming back and I provide some stability in that, you know, I know Nottinghamshire really well. I've lived in Nottinghamshire majority of my life and worked in Nottinghamshire most of my career. So for me, I think I can give that stability. I already have those working relationships with the Chief Officer team. But in terms of moving forward and being able to continue providing that stability, for me, I think it's important, first of all, to understand why people are leaving. So I think there's something around people leave because they retire, and obviously, you know, we have to, that is part of an organisation and the way an organisation works. But what we can do around that is succession planning. So for me, what I want to do is, you know, particularly when we talk about at a local level, there's a, you know, change of staff and change of inspector. I know somebody's mentioned around local inspectors, is that we have some sort of plan in place that we know where the next where these next people are going to come from, who would be best to do the role, because I think that will help us, will make the impact of that change less. But I think the other thing I also want to do is ensure that people aren't leaving the organisation unnecessarily early because things aren't right for them in the organisation. And that's when I talked to you about having an inclusive workplace where people feel that they, you know, they can be their true self. People, you know, perform much better then. So for me, around, you know, particularly around when people do leave, understanding the reasons why they're leaving, and making sure that informs our working practices. And again, if there are issues, we address them at an early point. So I think sort of twofold really in relation to your question, sort of three probably. First of all, I think, yes, there's been a churn, but I'm confident that I can give that stability back. I understand where Mr Guilford was taking the force. I was an ACC here for a long time. I've only been in Derbyshire. I've not been miles where I can see what's happening. I have an understanding. I think that gives me some things to bring back. But what I also want to do is make sure we've got succession planning in place, you know, wherever possible. It's always a challenge. But also then we've also got that reassurance that we aren't losing people because they feel that the organisation is treating them unfairly, or they feel in a difficult position with the organisation and it's no longer tenable. So that's sort of the response to that question.
Just to comment, picking up some points people have made about neighbourhoods, you know, we do see a fairly rapid turnover of neighbourhood inspectors, which can provide an opportunity, but can also provide problems.
Yeah, and I think that there is always going to be some turnover. You know, there will always be people progressing and wanting to sort of divert in their careers. But I think we, as I say, we do need to try and find that healthy balance, and that's something that I talk about when I talk about succession planning and the stability of some of those neighbourhood teams. That's what we need to aim for, and you know, something that I aspire to do.
You'll be pleased that we're getting to the last question, I'm sure. Miss Leslie Delby, thank you.
Morning, Kate. To take all these challenges forward, you obviously need the support of all your staff, including frontline and backroom staff. And the Commissioner mentioned earlier that you empower staff. Would you expand on this, and what arrangements will you put in place to support the welfare of police officers and staff? And also, can you expand on an expression you've used a few times this morning, telling staff that they should be their authentic self? I'm just a bit interested in what you mean by that. Thank you.
I'll try and remember all those bits, but if I forget, remind me. So I think the first bit was around sort of welfare. And for me, welfare is critical. And I think often people talk about welfare and, you know, making sure our staff are our most valuable asset. But for me, it's more than that. I want Nottinghamshire Police to be a healthy and happy workplace for people to come to work, because I genuinely believe that if they're engaged, they believe in the vision, we're more likely to deliver what we want to do. But as I said, I keep talking about this, but it's again at how they then interact with members of the public, which is so important that we've talked about. So for me, that's why welfare is really important. I think there's lots of good work going on nationally around welfare, wellbeing and welfare that we can link into around sort of Oscar Kilos, and some good frameworks that I'd want to explore. I think there's some work around mental health. Lincolnshire are doing some particularly good work about mental health and around it's okay to not to be okay. You know, some of our staff are faced with some really challenging situations. We need to try and make them trauma resilient as best we can, not always then trying to pick the pieces up afterwards. So there's some opportunities around that. And I think for me as well, there's also some stuff around the sort of the wider well-being, around, you know, work around financial well-being and what we can do to assist our members of staff as we move into some difficult, challenging times, around, you know, providing additional information around sort of terms and conditions so that they can understand that and make good decisions, but also where they can go for assistance, because we don't want people working within the organisation finding themselves in those difficult positions. When you talk about, you asked me about being guardian of our values, it's quite simple really. What I would like is, you know, when we look at nationally when things have gone wrong, and I sort of use the example of incidents in the Met, people will make comments that will go unchallenged, and if things go unchallenged, they almost are validated and they're seen to be okay. If I haven't got people working in the organisation at that first instance to say, oh, hold on a minute, you know, that you shouldn't be speaking like that, you shouldn't be behaving like that, the behaviour will start to perpetuate, will be seen to be okay, and then will be, before we know it, will be causing us issues. That's internally, and again, I make no apologies for saying it, then again, that behaviour will then translate externally as well, and have that significant impact on members of the community. So that's what I mean really, is that people understand what our values are, and they're proud to stand up up for them, and they feel confident to stand up for them, and that they'll be supported in doing so. So some of that is around leadership as well. And there was a third bit, and I've forgotten the third bit, sorry.
I think you've told me about guardianship because it's about being your true authentic self, isn't
yes.
it?
Sorry, yeah. So, yeah, authentic self really is just too many people were in the past working within lots of organisations, but police particularly, have probably felt they can't be who they are. They can't sort of perhaps have their own opinions or, you know, their own lifestyle choices. So for me, it's around people being able to be comfortable in who they are, know that that will be accepted and valued. Because if we don't have that workforce that has different values and different perspectives, then again we'll just become a sort of mini robots, and we won't be able to be responsive and receptive to communities that are very different and varying as well. So it's just really for people to be confident to be who they are, and to be able to to challenge and not have to cover up and pretend to be something and present this false persona.
Thank you. And can I just ask what practical arrangements you've got in place then to meet your future staff?
Well,
to make sure,
nothing yet, because I didn't want to be presumptuous. So, but hopefully there'll be internal and external communication strategy, but particularly internally, I'll be wanting to get out to key places to meet people. Obviously, there's lots of different ways to do that, also through vlogs and things like that. I intend to work over Christmas and New Year to meet people. I think it's a really good opportunity at those times to see people when, you know, I'm very much a believer I wouldn't ask people to do something that I'm not prepared to do myself. You know, New Year's Eve, those sort of times I think are good times to see leaders. It's, for me as a senior leader, I think it says a lot about where I go, the questions I ask, and when I intervene says a lot about what my standards are. So for me, you know, that's the sort of thing that I'm talking about when I talk about that leadership style.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry, I did try to put it on. My question is just around, earlier this year we had the Peel assessment, which looked at, graded our performance across 9 areas. 2 were graded good, 6 were inadequate, and there was 1 that requires improvement. And I know you've obviously previously worked in the city. So, and obviously when people change jobs, they sometimes still have that kind of interest and look at it. How much of that actually came as a surprise, and how much of it do you think you could, because you're coming into it, basically you've got to improve in these areas, so how much of a challenge do you think that will be?
I'm doing it now. I think it is a challenge, but policing is a challenge. And I think, first of all, and this isn't around being dismissive of your question at all, but I think it is important to recognise that 2 areas were identified as good, and that was investigations and protecting vulnerable people, which is 2 really key pieces of police work, but also 2 areas which a lot of forces really struggle with. So I think that, and when I talk about building, that's something we need to make sure we build on that. The 6 areas around adequate, you know, we need to look at. I think the HMIC inspection gives us a real good opportunity for that objective view of where we are, and also comparison across the country as well. So there are some challenges in there, but also what there are is some ideas about how to progress, and ideas, you know, for me. So I would very much engage with the HMIC FRS around what they've done, around understanding what, you know, so there's a report, it's relatively brief, what's the other things that they found. So I think I mentioned it before, for me, around the AFIs, it's not just about looking at the ones that they've identified, it's looking wider than that. So I think I see that as a positive in terms of it gives me a framework of what I need to look at. And of course, yes, I would want to be seeing more of those becoming green, and certainly the requires improvement, which I know is around crime recorded. I'm confident we can do something about that. I think something's probably already started about that. but you know, they're all things which I think we can see improvements on relatively quickly. But what I will make sure we do, first of all, is we don't lose sight of what we're good at. We carry on doing that, but that we don't just tick a box and say, right, we've done that now, let's move on. That then becomes embedded as one of our things that we're good at, and we continue to sense check we're still doing those things well. Because I think otherwise what can happen is you tend to just go to the next thing, tick the box and move on. We need to make sure that these things become embedded in what we do, and confidently we are improving as an organisation as a whole and not just in one specific area.
Thank you very much, and thank you. I don't think, is there anyone else? Who wants to come back? Yeah. Oh, sorry, Councillor Khan, I missed seeing that, sorry.
Okay, no worries, thank you. Yeah, so I think you've got to recognise where we are doing things good, and I understand that, but my concern is about recording crime. So if we're not recording it and we're looking at confidence within the police and how do we build that, then obviously recording should be there. And I know, obviously, when I was looking through the report, it talks about we're still missing recording crime. So we've got mechanisms in place to pick that up. But it's when you talked about staff being open, transparent, and that kind of thing, that confidence about if people are missing recording crimes, then there's a lack of, so some sort of training needs to happen for they feel confident that they're not missing things. So how would you enable that?
So I couldn't agree with you more. We need to get crime recording right. So when you look at, and I hesitate slightly because I don't know specifically around all of the ones Nottinghamshire were missing. So a lot of them aren't when staff are going out and they're being told crimes. A lot of them are where somebody may ring in and say two or three, you know, they might report something and then make reference to other crimes. That's where they're not being picked up. So for me, we need to make sure we've got all those processes in place that mean we are picking them all up in all the different places. So particularly around antisocial behaviour that gets missed. So, you know, we need a plan to deliver that, because it isn't good enough that you know, that we're not recording that number of crimes. And exactly as you've said, it's key to public confidence, but it's also key for us in understanding what demand is and where the issues are. And I've spoken about that a lot. So I agree entirely with you, and I'll be looking to do that straight away. But just to sort of emphasise that it's not just about somebody reporting a specific crime. There's other areas that are being missed, and they're probably a little bit more difficult to pick up, but doesn't mean we're not going to try and pick up and make sure we've got the mechanisms in place to do that.
I'll try again. I think that is the last question. First of all, thank you very much, Kate, for your clear, concise and well thought through answers to a significant amount of questioning from the panel, in which I hope they feel they've had a good opportunity to listen to you and understand where your thoughts are taking you if you're appointed to the post. Is there anything you'd like to ask the panel? It's not compulsory.
No, I don't think so. Thank you. I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity this morning, and to say, you know, I know there's sort of invitations around, you know, going out and obviously to look at that. But likewise, if I'm successful and there's new members of the panel wanting to come into, you know, to look at the organisation, more than happy to facilitate that as well, because I think that understanding facilitates the relationship.
Thank you very much. And we have been fortunate throughout the last few years to have the opportunity of either visiting the premises to see something specific and being hosted by the Commissioner, or indeed the Commissioner has very kindly arranged for certain other areas. We do find that incredibly helpful. Otherwise, if we're not careful, it's just a dry panel, and you don't get that real feel for what actually is going on in the real world, as you might say. So thank you for that invitation. The panel will now be invited to exclude the press and public for the remainder of the meeting on the grounds that discussions are likely to involve disclosure of exempt information described in Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, and the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in closing it. I'll propose that from the Chair. May I have a second? Seconded by the Vice Chair. Thank you very much, everyone. Oh, can I put that to the vote for members? Thank you. Thank you very much. I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much for your attendance today, and we'll see some of you later in the day.